Welcome to the 80th episode of the New Ventures podcast. I am your host, Sanjoy Sanyal, the founder of Regain Paradise, a boutique climate finance firm and a visiting fellow at the Cambridge Judge Business School. Along with my co-host, Professor Jaideep Prabhu, we try and understand the links between climate change and food security in these series of conversations.
Hi, I'm Jaideep Prabhu. I'm a professor of marketing at the Cambridge Judge Business School. My area of interest is innovation, more specifically frugal innovation, how to do more and better with less. And it's through that interest in frugal innovation that I'm also interested in food security and climate change. Delighted to be on this podcast with you.
Our guest for today is Oyunchimeg Amartuvshin, the Senior Program Development Officer, Central Asia of the Global Green Growth Institute.
Thank you, Sanjoy. Hello, everyone. But you can call me Oyuna.
Oyuna, it's wonderful to be with you on this podcast. It would be great if we could start with a little bit about yourself, your background, education, what you did before joining the Global Green Growth Institute, and so on.
Sure. Thank you, Jaideep. I'm excited to be here on the podcast today. So with almost 2 decades of experience in program and portfolio development and management, my focus has been on advancing green growth and climate policy across Asia, with the last 3 years dedicated to Central Asia and Caucasus. I've had the privilege of working closely with governments and stakeholders to foster partnerships and develop and implement sustainable development programs and projects. I have been with the Global Green Growth Institute for more than 8 years now. Prior to that, I worked in the private sector, specifically in the finance and tech industries. I'm originally from Mongolia, but I have spent half of my adult life living and working in East Asia, including Japan, Korea, and briefly in Southeast Asia, specifically in Singapore. Currently, I'm based in Seoul, where I continue to drive green growth initiatives with Global Green Growth Institute. I'm passionate about making a positive impact on the environment and look forward to sharing insights and experiences with you all today.
Wonderful, Oyuna. It'd be nice if you could give us an introduction to the Global Green Growth Institute and particularly how it got involved in the Aral Sea project.
Certainly, Sanjoy. The Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, was established as a treaty-based international intergovernmental organization in 2012 at the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. GGGI supports its member states in transitioning their economies towards a green growth model that simultaneously achieves poverty reduction, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability and economic growth. With 48 member states and over 24 partner countries and regional integration organizations in the process of accession, GGGI delivers programs and projects in over 50 countries across the globe. These initiatives include developing innovative green growth solutions, providing technical support, capacity building, policy planning and implementation, and assisting in building a pipeline of bankable green investment projects, project financing, investment, and knowledge sharing. GGGI's work contributes to its member states' effort to fulfill Sustainable Development Goals, known as SDGs, and the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. The government of Uzbekistan became a member of GGGI in 2019 and ratified the host country agreement in 2021. Following this, the government of Uzbekistan, together with GGGI, identified and endorsed the implementation of green rehabilitation investment project for Karakalpakstan Republic to address impacts of Aral Sea crisis. We call it Aral Sea Grid Project. This project started in 2021, is now in its final year of implementation.
That's really interesting. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about the project itself, what its objectives are, a bit about the geography. If you could paint a picture of the location and area, that would be great.
Of course. The Green Rehabilitation Investment Project for Karakalpakstan Republic aims to foster sustainable development, climate resilience in the region by implementing climate-smart agricultural practices, enhancing rural food security, and promoting sustainable livelihoods. The project focuses on reducing disaster risk through innovative agribusiness models, addressing urgent human security needs, and supporting the economic foundation of Karakalpakstan agrarian economy. Additionally, it seeks to mobilize green and climate finance, facilitating the development of green micro, small, and medium enterprises with the support of the government and financial institutions. The project is focused on the Karakalpakstan Republic in Uzbekistan, a region severely impacted by the Aral Sea crisis. This area faces significant challenges such as water shortages, soil salinity, dust storms, desertification, and climate stress factors like rising temperatures and frequent droughts. The project is funded by the Korea International Cooperation Agency, known as KOICA, and implemented by GGGI. The government of Uzbekistan has also, of course, endorsed and supported the project, collaborating closely to ensure its successful implementation.
Oyuna, you keep mentioning the Aral Sea crisis, and it's known to people across the world. What caused it, and what are its implications?
Sure. The Aral Sea crisis began back in 1960s when Soviet Union back then diverted the key rivers, Amudarya and Sirdarya rivers, for large-scale irrigation projects to boost cotton and crop production in the region. Inefficient irrigation systems led to significant water wastage, drastically reducing the Aral Sea's inflow and causing it to shrink by over 90%. This disaster has been exacerbated by climate change, which has brought rising temperatures, severe droughts, and altered precipitation patterns, further depleting water resources, increasing soil salinity, and intensifying dust storms and desertification. Once comparable in size to Ireland, the Aral Sea's dramatic reduction over several decades has resulted in severe environmental degradation, heavy pollution, and increased poverty. The economic impact includes the collapse of fishing industry, a decline in agricultural productivity. Socially, many people have been forced to migrate due to the deteriorating living conditions. The exposed seabed now generates toxic dust storms, causing significant health issues for the local population.
Oyuna, I wonder if I could just jump in there because I've always wondered how that happened. So I understand that there was this big drive to grow cotton, and cotton is, of course, a very thirsty crop. It needs a lot of water. And I know you have these two very big rivers. In fact, the word Darya is also very colorful for Indians. We understand the word. We use the word Darya as well for river. And I know these rivers also have a big mythology behind them. So they clearly have a very big role. What I don't understand, were they feeding into the Aral Sea? So how is it that if the rivers were diverted, the Aral Sea shrank in size? I can't understand how that happened.
So these two rivers, especially the Sirdarya River, was the tributary river, which means the main feeding river to Aral Sea. So basically, in the region, if you see the geography, from the Tian Shan Mountains on the east side of the region, where Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan is now located, these two rivers get water resources and throughout the region, and it was feeding the Aral Sea. That's why unfortunate catastrophe happened when these rivers were diverted, and plus the water efficiency was very not the optimal practice back then, which some scientists flagged that the water efficiency was less than 70% of the water was lost in the transition. So that's the main reason of the crisis.
I got it. That's really helpful. Could you tell us a little bit about the water inefficiency? So what exactly happens? Because I would think that the water would, in a sense, seep into the ground and then maybe just add to the groundwater. Is that not the case? So what happens? Does it just evaporate? I'm just curious to know about that aspect of the geography.
Sure. So basically, if you read the scientific reports, the main reason was the water evaporation. Because the region itself originally is a very dry desert climate. So back then Soviet Union, the policymakers were trying to kind of tame the nature and trying to transform the desert into cotton field. That's what exactly happened. So when these canals were diverted to the cotton field, as I said, it was the water efficiency was not the perfect one. So 70% of the water in the transition was evaporated from the land and then lost.
Jaideep, I'm thinking about what Oyuna said, and I'm thinking of some of your books as well. I'm thinking that these large-scale infrastructure projects, which you think are grand and will have huge impact, often just works the other way around.
Yeah, this seems to be a classic example of that kind of top-down planning, the hubris of modernism, where we think we can tame nature and bend it to our will, with unintended consequences, very disastrous consequences in this case, because I can imagine that the plan was to grow cotton, which is very remunerative. So, Ayuna, maybe you could tell us a bit about what actually then happened, the unintended consequences, because I imagine the Soviets were hoping that they would make it into a very rich region. And in fact, I believe that cotton is still grown extensively despite the water shortages. So maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. So just to give you about a few facts about the actual crisis. So the dry seabed of Aral Sea has now turned into Arakan Desert, one of the newest deserts in the world. And maybe another example is the exposed seabed has led to salt and dust storms, which carry toxic chemicals from pesticide and fertilizer that were used in the region's cotton farming. And the dramatic ecological changes have led to extinction of many fish species that were once abundant in the Aral Sea. Well, these all, facts illustrate the profound and multifaceted impact of the Aral Sea disaster, highlighting both the environmental and human toll of this ecological catastrophe. Point you mentioned, Jaideep, the cotton is a very water-hungry crop, as we all know, and still a grand plan of the Soviet Union was actually successful. They thought it was a very successful way. Uzbekistan started exporting the cotton throughout the Soviet Union, and actually in some numbers it says 70% of the Uzbekistan was providing 6%, 70% of the cottons in the Union, which shows it's grandiose. But even today, the cotton is still grown, but as I said, the climate change is exacerbating all the conditions. And then the region itself, the climatic conditions are not the best suited for the cotton growth. And then, in general, the agricultural situations. On top of that, the water resources on the upstream countries, all these glaciers are melting. In fact, we've been hearing from for example, the government of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan that they already lost this 30% of the water, resources that were kept as a glacier in the high up mountains. So which means that there's even less and less water resources now available for the region and for agricultural purposes.
And what is the implication for the communities? So you've implied that there's still some cotton farming. Is that enough to support the livelihoods of people? What happened to all the fishing communities? Have people left the area? What is the sort of population situation like at the moment?
So we have to look at probably more on the sub-regional levels. So cotton fields are mostly in the Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and some desert areas of the Uzbekistan. Based on the Aral Sea, the fishing industry was booming back then, where they had even a big manufacturing processing farms with 1,000 people employed. So all that is now gone for Aral Sea region, so especially for the Karakalpakstan Republic. So if you look at the Karakalpakstan specifically, the impact is very much disastrous. In some numbers, even in fact, the government is giving us the third of the quarter of the population is had to flee the region, Karakal, Pakistan, due to these disasters, due to the shrinkage of the water Aral Sea. Not only that, this toxic dust and salty storms, it's actually going back to the whole region, actually even negatively impacting the existing agricultural processes, to requiring the agricultural processes to use even more fertilizers to increase the yield. It's like a vicious cycle. So the more fertilizers, the soil degradation is even more exacerbated. And then, of course, in the Karakal, Pakistan, the desertification is exacerbated in ever faster now. So that's what's happening. So you could imagine all the health issues, all the food security issues, all the social issues that's negatively impacting, especially the Karakal, Pakistan region around the Aral Sea.
So in that context, what can be done? What are you doing? How are you helping with the rehabilitation of the region?
This GGGI's project is called Green Rehabilitation. It basically refers to restoring the environment while promoting sustainable economic activities. So our vision, together with the government of Uzbekistan and Karakal, Pakistan Republic, is to create a resilient ecosystem that supports both the environment and local communities. So we basically, throughout the project, we are helping the government to achieve objectives related to environmental restoration, sustainable agriculture, and improving the livelihoods of local communities. The main objectives of the project aims to support the green rehabilitation and disaster reduction. One of the primary objectives is to establish an effective green rehabilitation investment plan targeted at agriculture and agribusinesses. This plan aims to reduce disaster risk, enhance rural food security, and promote sustainable livelihoods. By developing climate-resilient agribusiness models and integrating climate-smart agricultural techniques, we are helping the government to build a more resilient agricultural sector that can withstand and recover from environmental shocks. Also, we are helping to enhance the food security and sustainable livelihoods. Together with the government, we are keen on promoting food security and creating sustainable livelihoods for communities severely affected by the Aral Sea crisis. Our project supports this objective by implementing agribusiness models that increase agricultural yields and foster the emergence of climate-resilient farmers, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. This approach not only addresses immediate food security concerns, but also lays the foundation for long-term economic stability and growth. On top of this, we're also trying to help the government to mobilize green finances. The main goal of the government aims to mobilize green and climate finance. So we are supporting this effort in developing the green MSMEs in Karakal, Pakistan. Our project assists in this effort by providing the necessary policy, financing, and investment framework. We work closely with the government bodies and financial institutions, local and international banks, to create enabling environment that attract and secure green investment, thereby ensuring the scalability and sustainability of green initiatives.
The setting up of agribusinesses in a place that has been affected by this crisis that you described is not easy. It is one thing to say that you're going to set up agribusinesses and support MSMEs, but in a place that has been besotted with so much crisis, people have left, that's not easy. How are you doing that?
Thank you, Sanjoy. Throughout our projects, we conducted extensive analysis to identify measures that can help build the resilience and adaptation for the local community. So these measures, they offer the best potential for sustainable water use, improving agricultural productivity, and protecting the soil from erosion. Of course, we also considered other options. We selected 3 specific measures, which is a drip irrigation, greenhouses, and trees for windbreaks. But we also considered other options, but these three stood out due to their effectiveness and feasibility. So let me a little bit elaborate on each of these solutions. So drip irrigation is highly efficient in water use, crucial in Karakal, Pakistan, where water scarcity is a significant issue. The system delivers water directly to the plant roots, reducing water loss through evaporation and runoff. Studies indicate substantial water savings up to 6,600 cubic meters per hectare for wheat and even 11,000 cubic meters per hectare for other crops. Implementing drip irrigation has shown to increase crop yield significantly.
A lot of people are familiar with the water saving potential of drip irrigation. The question is, will the farmers accept it? How are you making that possible?
There are several phases to this project. One is, of course, capacity building, increasing the public awareness, capacity building, and knowledge sharing. We're doing a lot of training, explaining the benefits of these, solutions, including drip irrigation, greenhouses. In fact, we trained 18,000 stakeholders through different phases. And once people understand the benefit of these solutions, they need to have tools to actually pilot to see the benefits. And that's where also our pilot project is coming. We're providing the tools and techniques, and we also helping them to receive the incentives. Together with the government, we are developing framework for the incentives for these farmers to actually pilot these solutions. So these are the steps we are taking so that farmers actually can feel and see the benefits and adapt to their own needs, these solutions.
When you say stakeholders, what do you mean?
When I say stakeholders, it's all the stakeholders who's actively participating in the agricultural practices in the Karakal, Pakistan region. These are, for example, most of them are private farms, which are independent economic entities conducting commercial agricultural production on leased land. Or these could be DEFCON farms, which is the term for small-scale family farms producing and selling agricultural products based on personal labor. So these two, entities are very adaptive to a new approach, innovative approaches. And also these two entities are contributing to agricultural outputs of Karakal, Pakistan. I think together it consists of almost 90% of the outputs.
You talked about greenhouses and trees that break the wind. These farms will implement the greenhouses and then they will put up agroforestry projects. Is that the vision?
Yes, exactly. So just to reiterate, greenhouse also houses provide a controlled environment that protects crops from adverse weather conditions, pests, and diseases, which are prevalent in the harsh climatic conditions of Karakal, Pakistan. So this ensures more consistent and higher quality production of vegetables and fruits. All this drip irrigation, greenhouses, and trees for windbreaks, we asking all these agribusinesses to adapt and pilot and see the actual results and scale it up.
Oyuna, when I read about the Aral Sea, what's happened in Karakal, Pakistan, and so on, and now hearing you describe the situation, at some level, it seems almost hopeless, if I may use that very strong word. It seems like such a difficult thing to reverse, the scale of the problem, given that we are fighting decades of wrong policy at a huge scale, and also given that climate change is happening. Is it really possible to reverse what has happened? And in a way, is it worth the cost and the investment? Or are there better solutions? Maybe just we move people to more fertile regions or they move into other occupations. I don't mean this as a heartless question, but as a genuine sort of question of what's the best way to proceed here.
I think that's a fair question, Jaideep. But just to give you an example, The Aral Sea, when all this crisis began, actually were split into two, like small Aral Sea and large Aral Sea parts, which is small Aral Sea is mostly fall in the Kazakhstan territory, and then the large Aral Sea is based in Uzbekistan. When all this early 2000 or even the 1990s, Kazakhstan government started, intervening to stop the negative impacts of the crisis, and they basically try to avoid the crisis at all costs. And then they actually built a dam to split the two seas, and then actually the result was quite surprising. All the ecosystem quickly revived, but that's for the small Aral Sea part, where they are now, the water level is returning to its original level. But your question is more relevant to the large Aral Sea in Uzbekistan, where they couldn't do the necessary intervention due to the lack of resources, capacity. Remember, this desert area, this Central Asia, especially Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, originally very dry and arid region, and still they can grow some local, for example, trees called saksaul, and this is quite being successful in a way to stop the desertification, for example, and even decrease to some level the salination and the soil erosion. So this is what we're trying to do together with the government in Uzbekistan. And actually there are some crops, some types of fruits and vegetables and crops where I was mentioning could be grow, and then using this drip irrigation or greenhouses, so that they can also, have some economic means to support their livelihoods. I don't think we should just give up and then try to move everyone to a more fertile region, because there are ways to actually adapt to the situation crisis, even though it is actually very catastrophic. And just to remind you, climate change is not getting any better any soon with the business as usual. So these situations is not only might be relevant for Karakalpakstan, this might happen in anywhere in the world. So we just need to learn from these mistakes to find a solution and to adapt to this new reality, I would say.
So that's wonderful to hear that it can be reversed, that there's been the success in the small Aral Sea, and you are seeing ways to possibly reverse it even with the large Aral Sea, or at least up to a point. And also this point you made about we can learn a lot from this. And in fact, when you were talking, I was thinking about India's own very large experiment with agriculture, which is the Green Revolution, which was tremendously successful, of course, but has also caused consequences down the road of water depletion, misuse of water and energy, and also excessive use of fertilizer and pesticide and so on. So is that the motivation for all the member countries of GGGI to focus on this project? Because otherwise one might ask, why are all these other countries interested in investing in a problem that is specifically Uzbekistani?
Definitely. I mean, even though the population has migrated and shrank in Karakalpakstan, let me remind you, there are still almost 2 million people living in the Karakalpakstan Republic, and most of them are still very much dependent on the agriculture. So it's just all the relevant, examples you gave from India. So we just need to find a way to adapt. That's why we were talking about adaptation, adapt and then build our resilience in our member countries. And now we are, just to give you some context, we are talking here about the desertification, all this drying up, lands that dried up. But on the other hand, for example, we have it's a little bit maybe going sides, but there are small island nations where, because of the climate change and its negative impact, the water level is rising. So they're gonna be no land for the whole nation. They can't just give up and then to accept the, I guess, to say fate. But on one hand, we have to do something, urgent to stop the climate change, all this crisis. But on the other hand, it's already happening. Of course, the Aral Sea was initiated with the different causes, but then climate change is not helping it. And so we have to, similar in other regions, the climate change is already there. So we have to find a way to adapt.
But there's also an issue about the private investment, right, that you are trying to bring in. It is important to adapt and we can't give up. But are private investors investing, or have they shown genuine interest? And who are these private investors that you are trying to attract?
Definitely, the project, the GRIP Karakalpakstan project, actively actually trying to involve the private sector to enhance this agricultural productivity, economic resilience, and sustainable development. This involvement includes, for example, providing high-quality agricultural inputs, advanced technologies like drip irrigation systems, and establishing processing centers for value addition. The private sector also plays a crucial role in connecting farmers to local and international markets, facilitating the export of high-value crops.
I know who these private sector people are. Are they companies which are selling drip irrigation? Are they companies which are selling greenhouses? Are they large companies which are buying these products, or are they local banks? Just help us get that picture.
We are talking to the several, almost all of the financial institutions in the country, where to see the appetite, whether they are willing to support these smallholder farmers to adapt these solutions, technologies to within initial investments. And actually, there was some success already in this process, and we found a few banks have shown genuine interest to create a credit line for the smallholder farmers. And with the government backing up with some credit insurances. So basically, it's a public and private partnership, PPP, which actually will provide the most necessary investment and the resources for the smallholder farmers to adapt these new solutions. So this is just one example where we're partnering with the private sector. Maybe I can also talk about one activity we did in our project. So we actually developed a business development platform. It's an online platform. So together with all these different stakeholders, including the private sector and the public sector. So private sector, meaning the technology providers you just mentioned, the drip irrigation suppliers, greenhouse suppliers, where the public sector provides knowledge and policy, providing policy and regulatory support to the farmers, and also international partners, the other development partners also contributing to this effort. So basically, we try to build a one-stop shop for local farmers, stakeholders who are interested in improving their livelihood through these agricultural practices, providing with all the necessary support and knowledge and platform and networking that can be accessed at this platform. We call it like Green Aral platform.
So that is very encouraging. I mean, a line of credit, I suppose, from local banks, right?
Yes.
To farmers, and a website, a business platform that allows information exchange between technology providers and other private sector players. But I had two questions. Number one is, maybe because I'm not very familiar with this, are these farms, as you said, smallholder farmers? Because I understood that there was a fair amount of collectivization of farms in the Soviet time. So are these farms very large farms now in private hands, or are they smallholder farmers like we see in other parts of the world? And I'll actually get in a quick second question as well that you can respond to, which is, this is a desert area, right? And you have said this many times, and you are now trying to grow as you said, fruits and vegetables. Is that at all possible?
So I'll start with the second question. Yes, it's possible, and we already identified several fruits and vegetables, but we are suggesting, to grow it greenhouses, not in the open land, for the several reasons, benefits I explained earlier. And also there's, for example, another crop we identified, which is actually very much suitable for this environment, which is a sorghum. You might know. Sorghum is actually a very highly drought-tolerant crop, which making it very well suited for the arid and semi-arid regions of Karakalpakstan. It also can withstand extreme temperatures and low water availability, which are common challenges in the region. And also sorghum has a higher tolerance to soil salinity compared to many other cereal crops. This is a big issue actually, especially in the Karakalpakstan, in Aral Sea region, which makes the sorghum an ideal crop for for this area, which is affected by soil degradation and salinity. Just wanted to show you this is possible. There are some solutions. And of course, there are also other benefits to sorghum, to grow sorghum, like some economic benefits, food security benefits, nutritional benefits. So basically, what I'm trying to say is we need to focus on the fruits and vegetables and sorghums in Karakalpakstan, and it's very strategic because these crops were chosen due to this very high potential for improving climate resilience, economic returns, and food security. We know that there are three different types of agricultural enterprises. Private farms, which are, I can also explain what are the investment capacities for these, different types of agricultural entities. So private farms, it's an independent economic entities conducting, commercial agricultural productions on leased lands. So these are actually contribute almost 60% to the agricultural output of the Karakalpakstan. So majority is private farms in the region. Deccan farms, it's a more smaller, scale family farms produced and selling agricultural product based on family labor. Deccan farms have benefited from government policies, especially promoting agricultural diversification and intensification. They remain still, vital part of the agricultural sector, often leading in the adoption of new agricultural techniques because they are more agile and more approachable. And these Deccan farms contribute to even more than 30% to the agricultural output of the Karakalpakstan. And the other type of the agricultural entities are legal entities managing land and producing crop and livestock products. Actually, these organizations, we call it agricultural enterprises. So these organizations have developed significantly in recent years, primarily due to the government initiatives to promote cooperative and cluster agricultural products. But I think these, especially the agricultural enterprises, still contributes to the agricultural production outputs very small percentage, less than 10%. Each one of these types of farms in Karakalpakstan that are active today, they have a different pros and cons in terms of the investment capacity for, of course, all these, adaptation measures we've been talking about. For example, these farms have larger land holdings, better access to financial resources, making them well positioned to invest in advanced technologies like drip irrigation or greenhouses. But when it comes to Deccan farms, these more smaller farms are more proactive in adapting new techniques and benefiting from government support. And they are still crucial for implementing adaptation measures like greenhouses and drip irrigation. So these are mostly the stakeholders we are targeting to scale up or to adapt the local community, these new practices, agricultural practices.
Oyuna, you painted a very nice picture of the nature of the different entities involved and the different stakeholders. From previous podcasts, we've learned that when you try to change the behavior of particularly smaller farmers and try to get them to switch crops, it's quite difficult to do that. There's a lot that has to be done. Like you have to build a whole new ecosystem of both supply and routes to market. Is that what you're finding as well in this region?
Yes, that's a good point. I think in helping farmers to switch to different practices and to adapt the new practices, we have to ensure several things. For example, availability of seeds, knowledge disseminations, and also to build some economic means, processing centers, also market linkages. All these can help farmers to switch to other crops or adapt the new practices will help them to adapt these practices. So we did also several, detailed report on the framework to help the government or local government to adapt these comprehensive plans, mainly addressing these key issues and how actually government and also through the financial incentives can support the farmers to adapt the new practices.
And what about the agricultural enterprises, the sector which today contributes less than 10%, but I guess you're making efforts to help them grow?
Agricultural enterprises, of course, these have more means to actually scale up, more capability to scale up these practices in the region. What I'm trying to say is that these entities have more organizational structure and financial resources necessary for substantial investment in agricultural infrastructure. So this means we need to focus on, for example, involving them in a pilot project. So these organizations can benefit from international and government funding aimed at modernizing the agriculture so that they can scale up the whole practice in the region.
And why do you say that they have substantial capacity to invest? Are they cooperatives? It seems that you're alluding that they have reasonable size.
Actually, yes, these are the more organized, cooperatives and clustered agricultural entities. They're producing the cluster agricultural productions. That's why I'm saying these entities has a more organizational and capacity to scale up the practices in the region.
Oyuna, maybe I can ask you a question from my area of interest, which is frugal innovation, how you can do more with less. So drip irrigation is a great example of that. Increase productivity while reducing the amount of water needed. What are some of the other frugal innovations, ways in which you are doing more with, say, less investment or less time needed or less resources of other kinds like energy or water to drive implementation and adoption? Are there any things that stick out in your mind?
Creating large-scale impact with limited financial resources, especially in the regions like Pakistan, involves leveraging, like you mentioned, the frugal innovation principles to maximize efficiency and sustainability. The project we are implementing in Pakistan provides a actually comprehensive blueprint for achieving long-term change through strategic investment in low-cost, high-impact intervention, fostering, of course, private sector involvement and utilizing local resources and knowledges. And of course, another key aspect of this is building capacity, empowering community, local, especially communities. Because the capacity building is essential for sustaining long-term change, the project provides extensive training on modern farming techniques, business management, and financial literacy, equipping farmers with skills needed to optimize their operations. This empowerment enables farmers to become self-sufficient and innovative, driving continuous improvement in their practices. The other thing I would add is also the enhancing access to finances, and we touched on this a little bit before. And the other point I would also add is also, of course, the promoting sustainable, market development,
Very
especially
interesting,
creating.
Oyuna. Yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, creating sustainable and transparent market is, I think, is vital for long-term impact. This GGGI project, it promotes the development of local and international market linkages, ensuring that farmers have reliable outlets for their produce. This not only, of course, increases their income, but also integrates them into broader value chains, enhancing economic resilience. Visualizing this long-term change through, as you said, frugal innovation in regions like Karakalpakstan and Uzbekistan involves all this multifaceted approach that combines, low cost, high impact intervention, private sector engagement, local resource utilization, capacity building, access to finance, and sustainable market development.
And we've come to the end of the podcast, so I'm going to squeeze in one last question. You mentioned a couple of times during the podcast of a pilot project. Is this a pilot project within the overall project?
Yes, actually, it's a pilot project within the overall project. So we're actually providing with the grant funding, providing some resources to farmers. We actually selected several farmers. Of course, we recruited several stakeholders who has interest first, and then we provided several trainings, as I mentioned, from the different perspective, different angles, so they have a better knowledge and make an informed decision. And actually, we are providing with the grant funding, the greenhouses and some of the processing centers, building some processing centers in the region to showcase, it's actually possible, and then also to using this pilot project, we want to attract, scalable investment to replicate and scale up.
No final questions. That's been amazing, Oyuna. Thank you so much.
Do you have any questions for us, Oyuna?
Yes, thank you so much, Sanjoy and Jodip. It was actually also very interesting experience for me. And I actually went through your podcast. I had one question, based on this extensive experience in, conversations with these different champions or stakeholders across various sectors. What have you learned about the critical challenges and innovative solutions for food security in Central Asia? Given these insights, what strategic areas should GGGI focus on to enhance food security and increase public awareness in the region? What do you think?
When I heard you talk, responding to my question about frugal innovation, I heard a lot of things that were similar to what I've heard people from other parts of the world who are trying to do similar things in those parts of the world. These initiatives, like what you are doing in Central Asia with GGGI, are very complex. You're trying to reverse decades of industrial practice gone wrong, loss of maybe traditional approaches to agriculture that worked for centuries before that, and of course, dealing with climate change on top of it. So, all the things that you described seem to me the right things to do. And what it requires is just perseverance and persistence over a long period of time to see the fruits of that action. So, that's what I would say. Sanjoy, any thoughts?
Yeah, Jadip, from my point of view, one big thing that I'm learning is how do you bring in multiple actors on the same problem? Through all the podcasts that we've done in Asia and Africa, and to be honest, this is our first Central Asian podcast. The key actors, apart from the government, which is important actor in food security issues, the key actors are local nonprofits, the farmers they support, but also private sector enterprises and international organizations like yours. The ability for private sector enterprises to provide market access and also to provide inputs and bring in innovative measures which involve technology and or business models. That really is key. And ensuring their partnership with local NGOs, which allow these technologies to seep into the broader ecosystem. Because international organizations like yours, you can go in and you can do a project for 4 years, 5 years, and typically you'd have to get out. And then for large-scale impact for 10 to 15 years, private sector actors, which involve both for-profit and non-profit organizations in the local context, is very important. So strengthening their hands, to me, is a really key issue.
Thank you. I think that both it's a very good feedback and insights. We will keep focusing and trying our best.
And if people want to get in touch with you, how should they, Oyuna?
Get in touch with me through email, Oyunchimeg.Amartuvshin, basically my full name, at GGGI.org. We have a website, gggi.org, website, and there are, of course, all the contact details. You can reach out to anyone interested, on any subject matter that relevant to GGGI. I do have a LinkedIn account, which is Oyuna Amar. If people want to contact through LinkedIn, that's more than welcome, of course.
We are at the end of the podcast. So first of all, thank you very much, Oyuna. This has been a illuminating conversation, to say the least.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, the pleasure is mine, both Sanjoy and Judith. Thank you so much. It was great to be here. I could only wish you all the success with your podcast going forward, and to see many more to come and go to audience.
Thank you.
That's a very lovely wish. If you like this podcast, do visit us on regainparadise.org, regainparadise.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you can also subscribe to these podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Google, Apple, and YouTube.